And joining me now exclusively is President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. All right, Mr. Mayor, Rubio says take a chill pill, basically. This subpoena for Don Jr. is just apparently part of just generic oversight. What's your reaction tonight?
Oh, well, I mean, I respect both senators very, very much. I've actually campaigned for both of them. I don't understand what the oversight is. I mean, he testified for 29 hours, I think. So maybe there's a question or two that wasn't asked. They could, send him an interrogatory and get the answer. I don't know why you'd harass the man more than you have. I mean, actually, Mueller came to a pretty definitive conclusion that Donald Trump Jr. did nothing wrong, that there was no suggestion that he would have any reason to have believed that it was a violation of the law to meet with that Russian woman. It turns out that the really interesting part of that meeting is it looks like a setup by a Fusion GPS, because the woman met with Glenn Simpson, the head of that, the day before, the day of, and the day after. They never followed up. I've been doing this a long time, and if that isn't a setup, I'd be really surprised. I'd rather see them kind of look into that. I don't know what they could possibly ask Donald Trump Jr. that wasn't asked in 29 hours.
I think, Rudy, they're going to talk. It sounds like the focus in part would be on the discussions to build a Trump Tower in Moscow before the election actually took place.
So what does that have to do with oversight? That sounds like an investigating
it sounds like they're
the
redoing
investigation
Mueller.
again. Right.
Yeah, I got so many texts today from friends who aren't really all that political, but they were just like, I said, what? That doesn't make sense to us. And I didn't really have a good answer for any of them. All right, Rudy, I have to bring this up because I thought of you when I heard that CNN was doing a town hall tonight, not with a 2020 candidate, but with your favorite former FBI director, Jim Comey. Because he was out of the redwood trees and he was marking his 2-year anniversary of being fired by President Trump. And listen, because he's still not over it.
Do you think he should be charged when he's out of office?
I think
based on what Mueller has shown.
Well, I think the Justice Department will have to take a serious look at that. Whether it's a wise thing to do to a former president, I don't know.
Do you think the evidence is there to prosecute?
Sure looks like it's there with respect to at least a couple of those episodes of obstruction.
Rudy, Comey persists.
I apologize for having hired him years ago as an assistant U.S. attorney. I am very embarrassed about that. I don't know what happened to Jim Comey, but today's revelation by John Solomon is a blockbuster. I mean, it was clear to the State Department that the Steele dossier was a complete phony. The memo was circulated. If he didn't read it, he was sleeping. And, I've read part of that dossier, and I've done this Pfizer stuff for years. I was there when it first started. If you can't figure out that the Steele dossier is a piece of junk, then you shouldn't be FBI director. I have no doubt that he's got a serious problem having put his name on that affidavit and not revealed that it was unverified, not revealed that he took no steps to verify it. When a State Department employee was able to figure out that Steele lied about there being a consulate in Miami for the Russian government, that Steele lied. He hadn't been in Moscow. He hadn't been in Russia for 9 years.
But why did they keep using him? Why did the FBI continue to rely on Christopher Steele even after he broke the deal in the late summer? I believe it was in August of 2016 that he couldn't talk to the media. He broke the deal. He was deemed unreliable. But then it looks like they still kept using the fruits of his labor with this dossier.
Yeah, and also...
And him. And we kept meeting with him.
During that period, Comey never attempted to verify it. He had 5 months to do it. When he went to the president in early January of 2017 and said it's unverified and salacious, he had 5 months to verify it. If he had verified it, he would have found out very easily that there are 5 areas that were absolutely untrue. And he never revealed to the court this was a paid-for political document by Hillary Clinton. This is outrageous.
All right, Rudy, I want to move on to the backlash you've been receiving for calling on the DOJ, I guess, to investigate Biden and his family. You and I have talked about this before on the show, and these questionable ties to the Ukraine, especially this sweetheart payday Hunter Biden ended up getting with a fund there. Here, just a few of the examples. Let's listen.
Giuliani, the president's personal attorney, has been really pushing the Justice Department to go hard on Hunter Biden's ties to Ukraine.
It is a blatant move to use a foreign power to tarnish Trump's potential general election opponent.
Rudy Giuliani is telegraphing it. It's clearly Hunter, and in some ways they almost want to create a foreign interference, throw in the Ukrainians and the Russians, and Giuliani has been to the Ukraine. He's got Ukrainian clients.
Wait a second.
They're out of their minds.
Well, listen to this, Rudy.
Look,
Hold on. Just within the last hour, it gets better. The New York Times posted this story online. Quote, Giuliani plans Ukraine trip to push for inquiries that could help Trump. Ooh, you're not allowed to travel, apparently, Rudy.
Well, I'm his lawyer. One of the
Jeez.
things lawyers do when you defend a client is to develop innocent hypotheses, explanations of what your client was charged with. Well, the fact is that this was massive collusion between the Democratic National Committee, officials of the Obama administration, Clinton people, and the Ukrainian officials, corrupt officials, who, by the way, were pro-Russian corrupt officials, to create false information about Trump, about Manafort. This is real, not collusion, conspiracy to present false information and to leak it to the press and to give it to the FBI. The Ukrainian government is presently investigating it. My aim is to make sure that Soros representatives, who has a lot of influence in that government, and a very highly corrupt Ukrainian who actually participated in creating a false document about Paul Manafort. Actually, he's been found guilty of that by a Ukrainian court.
Yeah, I saw that.
That they do not prevent the continuation of this investigation, which they are trying to do. All I want the Ukrainian government to do is investigate and don't let these people buffalo you. And that's what they're trying to do.
But
now,
Rudy, I don't understand this. Why isn't the media interested in this? Why isn't the media pursuing this? If they're so into Russian collusion, the Russian collusion,
corrupt.
Why not this? I mean, it's a fascinating story, and everyone has to read John
It's a big story. It's a dramatic story, and I guarantee you, Joe Biden will not get to Election Day without this being investigated. Not because I want to see him investigated. This is collateral to what I was doing. But here are the facts, Laura. Joe Biden was appointed the point man for Ukraine. 2 to 3 weeks later, his son Hunter, who had just been tossed out of the military for testing positive to cocaine, was appointed to a position on the most corrupt agency or the most corrupt business in Ukraine, a natural gas business called Burisma, which was headed by an oligarch who was being protected by Putin in Russia. And Biden's kid took down about $3 to $4 million we can count. And Biden, when the kid got under investigation, actually says, quote, I strong-armed the president of the Ukraine to dismiss the prosecutor because the son of a, I'll leave it out, was corrupt. What he left out of the explanation was that prosecutor was right on the tail of his son, looking for the money that appeared to have been laundered from Latvia to Croatia to America. And when he tried to get the Croatian government to give the amount of money that Hunter Biden received, all of a sudden the president of the Ukraine gets a call from the vice president of the United States, and he's told you're not going to get your $1.2 billion loan guarantee, which they needed then to prevent default unless you dismiss the prosecutor. Yeah. The president didn't want to do it. He was the godfather of the prosecutor's children. He didn't want to do it.
This is like a James Patterson novel.
Now, if you tell me this doesn't get investigated between now and Election Day, then our justice system is as corrupt as the
Rudy,
Washington
Hunter Biden
Post,
had no experience.
CNN.
He had no experience in this. He had no experience
change the
in
names here,
gas.
Laura, to Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr., this would be on the front page of every one of those newspapers and all over CNN for the last 4 weeks.
Yeah,
this is the best evidence I've seen of media corruption.
Well, Rudy, I want to get back to Comey because more is coming in about what he said tonight. And he said that, and this kind of goes in line with this letter from over 800 former prosecutors who said that they think the conduct of Trump as described in the Mueller report does amount to obstruction of justice. But he specifically was asked if he believed that the president obstructed justice. Let's listen.
You think he had criminal intent based on what you have seen now in the Mueller report?
It sure looks like he did in connection with a couple episodes. The direction to Don McGahn to get the special counsel fired is, to my mind, a flaming example
of corrupt intent.
Yes, of corrupt intent.
This is a guy, Laura, who couldn't make a corruption case when 33,000 emails were deleted, cell phones were destroyed with hammers, and servers were bleached. And he couldn't make a corruption case based on that. That's corruption, when you destroy evidence. This is a case in which the president was innocent of the underlying charges, and he was defending himself against malicious, looks to me like very well organized, corrupt charges against himself. No prosecutor in the world would bring this case. And the people they got to sign that, I guarantee you there's not a single one that voted for Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah,
and I've never heard of prosecutors opining in a case they don't know about. That's a political statement. That's not a prosecutorial memo.
Hey,
and they should be ashamed of themselves. They don't know a damn thing about this case. All
Rudy,
they know is what they read in the newspapers and what they get from a highly biased report, a 440-page diatribe that is a complete violation of prosecutorial ethics.
Yeah, what I think is it tells me once again why I don't trust a lot of prosecutors today. Sorry. I mean,
well, please, I was one, and I have a lot of good friends who were.
I know you were,
and some of these people work for me, and I'm ashamed of them because you do not offer an opinion based on a case you didn't investigate.
Well,
if you do, you are doing a political statement, not a legal
they're acting
memo.
as political
Laura.
commentators. It's a scandal. Mr. Mayor, I know you could have gone on a lot of shows. We really appreciate
Well, I
your coming
guarantee you this will be eventually investigated, and it will be a massive scandal. You can't escape the facts. I've seen them. I've seen the corroboration. I've seen tapes. This is a very,
Rudy,
very big case and a disgraceful misuse of our law enforcement agencies
we gotta go.
and our intelligence agencies at the very top.
All right, Rudy, thank you so much.